The desert holds secrets like a miser hoards gold. Under the merciless sun, two hawks found the abandoned wagon half buried in sand, its wooden frame bleached white as bone. No bodies, no blood, just scattered children's belongings, telling of lives interrupted. The air around it felt wrong, like standing in the shadow of something invisible yet massive. Two hawks knew tracks, knew death, knew the natural order of things. This was none of those. Small footprints led away in all directions before simply stopping, as if the children had been plucked from the earth itself. What force could make 43 children vanish without struggle? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The early morning sun cast long shadows across the desert plains as two hawks knelt beside the tracks. His weathered fingers, cracked from years under the harsh sun, traced the edge of a small footprint. The wind had already begun its work, softening the edges, erasing the story written in the sand. Two hawks carried an eagle feather bound with red thread, his father's token, and passed down when he completed his first successful hunt decades ago. He ran his thumb over its smooth spine, drawing strength from the connection to his ancestors. "Speak to me," he whispered in Apache. Though he had not used his native tongue in many seasons, the desert offered only silence in return. Two hawks had lived alone in these borderlands for 15 winters, keeping distance between himself and both the white settlements and his own people. The elders had made their judgment after the incident, after his wife and child were taken while under his protection. His failure had cost him everything: family, standing, purpose. He had become a ghost, taking odd jobs, tracking lost cattle, or guiding occasional travelers foolish enough to venture through Apache territory without knowing the safe passages. He spoke just enough English to secure payment, just enough Apache to remember who he had once been. But these tracks, 43 children, the wagon master and 2 women, had pulled him back into a world he'd tried to forget. Children vanished without blood spilled. No sign of struggle. No bodies for burial. He removed his leather pouch, spreading its contents on a flat rock. A small obsidian blade, dried herbs gathered during the last full moon, a lock of dark hair wrapped in deerskin, all that remained of his daughter. His fingers lingered on the hair before selecting the herbs. He crushed sage between his palms, letting the scent clear his mind as he scattered it around the area where the smallest footprints disappeared. Something about these tracks reminded him of old stories, tales. The elders told in winter when the spirits walked close. To the world of the living, two hawks had stopped believing in such things. After the soldiers came with their guns and diseases, after watching his people confined to reservations. The old ways seemed powerless against repeating rifles and government papers, yet here was something the rational world could not explain. The tracks simply ended, not faded, not obscured, ended, as if the children had been lifted straight into the sky. Two hawks had been following rumors for 3 days before finding the wagon. Settlers in Copper Creek whispered about the orphan transport that never arrived at the mission. Most assumed Apaches were responsible. It was always easier to blame his people than to face an unsolvable mystery. He gathered his belongings, securing the medicine pouch at his hip. His horse, a sturdy paint Mustang, grazed nearby on sparse desert vegetation. The animal lifted its head, ears twitching nervously as two hawks approached. "You feel it too," he said, stroking the horse's neck. There was something wrong about this place, something that made the back of his neck prickle like approaching thunder. Two hawks mounted, turning toward Copper Creek. He had avoided white settlements whenever possible, but answers would not be found in empty desert. Someone had sent these children west. Someone would be looking for them, or avoiding questions about their disappearance. As he rode, his dreams from recent nights returned to him, visions of small shadows moving across moonlit sand, of children's laughter carried on wind that blew from nowhere, of small hands reaching through darkness. Two hawks had stopped believing his dreams held meaning after the elders cast him out. Now he wondered if the spirits had been calling him to this place, to these children. The weight of his failure pressed upon him like a physical thing. He had not saved his own child. Perhaps this was his chance for atonement, or perhaps this was merely the desperate hope of a lonely man seeking purpose. Either way, Two Hawks knew he could not turn away. The mystery of the vanished orphans had snared him as surely as any trap. He would find these children, or he would discover what had taken them. Copper Creek emerged from the desert like an afterthought, a cluster of weathered buildings clinging to existence along the newly laid railroad tracks. Two Hawks approached cautiously, aware of how his presence would be received. The settlement had sprung up 3 years earlier, when copper deposits brought prospectors, followed inevitably by saloons, a general store, and eventually women and children trying to build something permanent in the temporary world of boomtowns. The sheriff's office sat at the far end of the main street, a sturdy structure with a bench outside, where a deputy dozed in the midday heat. The young man's eyes snapped open as Two Hawks dismounted, and instinctively moving toward his holster. "State your business." "Indian," the deputy said, not bothering to stand. Two Hawks met his gaze steadily. "Sheriff. Need to speak with sheriff." "About what?" "Children." "Missing wagon." The deputy's expression shifted subtly, a tightening around the eyes that suggested the topic touched a nerve. He disappeared inside without another word. Moments later, an older man emerged, squinting against the sun. Sheriff Holloway stood a head shorter than Two Hawks, with a grey mustache and deep lines etched into leathery skin. He wore his authority, with the casual confidence of a man who rarely needed to draw his weapon. "You know something about them orphans?" he asked without preamble. Two Hawks nodded. "Found wagon. 3 days' ride west. No children." The sheriff studied him, then gestured toward the door. "Better come inside." The office was cool and dim after the bright desert sun. A large wooden desk dominated the small space, its surface covered with papers weighted down by a leather-bound ledger stamped with county records in faded gold lettering. The sheriff lifted the ledger, revealing a crude map beneath. 43 children, Holloway said, opening the ledger and turning it so Two Hawks could see. Being transported from St. Catherine's Orphanage in Chicago to the San Gabriel Mission near Los Angeles. His finger traced a line of neat script recording names, ages, and brief descriptions. Railroad gave them passage as a charitable gesture. Good publicity. Two Hawks examined the ledger pages, focusing on the children's names and ages. Some as young as 4, none older than 12. Too young to be traveling across such harsh country, even with guardians. When they didn't arrive on schedule, telegraph went out. Company sent men to look. The sheriff sighed, closing the ledger. Found nothing. Trail gone cold. Not cold, Two Hawks corrected. Strange. Track's end. No struggle. Something flickered in Holloway's eyes. Recognition, perhaps. You've seen something like this before. Two Hawks didn't answer directly. Why no more searches? Children important to white men. The sheriff's gaze dropped to the ledger. Railroad called off the search last week. Said animals or exposure likely got them all. His mouth tightened. They're eager to declare it a tragic accident and move on. Something about investors getting nervous. 43 bodies. Should be found. I know it. Holloway rubbed his face. But I don't have the men or the authority to keep looking when the railroad's saying drop it. Those children were nobodies, orphans being shipped west to work at the mission until they're old enough to be someone's servant or farmhand. Someone cares, Two Hawks said, or you would not speak with me. The sheriff gave a short laugh. Sharp, aren't you? There's a school teacher, Miss Bennett. She arranged the transport. As a sister who was traveling as one of the guardians. He paused. She's been raising hell about the search being abandoned. Two Hawks nodded. Understanding now why the sheriff had been willing to listen to an Apache bringing news of the missing wagon. Can you take me to where you found it? Holloway asked. Yes, but need supplies. 3 days there. 3 back, the sheriff considered, then nodded. Miss Bennett will want to come. She's stubborn as they come. My deputy, too. He extended his hand, a gesture rarely offered to Two Hawks people. I'm obliged for your help. Two Hawks hesitated before accepting the handshake. Not helping, hunting. The ledger sat between them, its pages filled with the names of children who had vanished. Into the desert without a trace, a physical manifestation of the mystery that had drawn him. Back to the world of men. Sheriff Holloway's office door burst open, revealing a woman whose appearance commanded attention despite her modest dress. Clara Bennett stood just under average height, but her rigid posture and direct gaze made her seem taller. Her dark hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and wire-rimmed spectacles perched on a nose that had clearly been broken and improperly set at some point in her 30-odd years. "Sheriff, Mr. Thornton is attempting to have my classroom reassigned for—" She stopped abruptly upon noticing two hawks. Her eyes narrowed, not with the usual suspicion white women showed toward Apaches, but with keen assessment. "Miss Bennett," Sheriff Holloway gestured toward two hawks, "this man has found the wagon." Clara's composure faltered. "The children?" "No sign," two hawks said. "Only wagon." She studied him with renewed intensity. "You tracked them?" "Tried. Track's end." "Nothing follows." Clara turned to the sheriff. "When do we leave?" "First light tomorrow," Holloway replied. "Deputy Wilson will accompany us." "I'll be ready." She removed her gloves deliberately, revealing hands calloused from work not typically associated with a schoolteacher. From her pocket, she withdrew a small silver object that caught the light, a marshal's badge tarnished with age. "My father's," she explained, noticing two hawks' attention. "He served as a territorial marshal in New Mexico for 20 years. She placed it on the sheriff's desk. "Said it always brought him home. Didn't know your father was law," the sheriff remarked. Examining the badge, "There's a great deal people don't know about me." "Sheriff?" Her voice carried a history of having to prove herself repeatedly. She turned back to two hawks. "My sister Margaret was accompanying those children. The orphanage selected her because she grew up at St. Catherine's herself. This journey was her chance to finally see the Western Territories." Two hawks nodded, recognizing the personal stake that drove her determination. "You have tracking skills." A faint, bitter smile crossed her face. "I can follow signs well enough. Taught myself after my father disappeared in the Sangre de Cristos. Found what the official search parties couldn't." She didn't elaborate on what she had found. "Clara's being modest," Sheriff Holloway interjected. "She's tracked down more lost children in these parts than my deputies and me combined." Clara dismissed the compliment with a wave. "Children follow patterns. They're predictable when frightened." Her voice softened. "But you're saying these children left no pattern to follow." "No pattern I understand," two hawks clarified. Deputy Wilson entered, carrying saddlebags and canteens. Young and eager, with a carefully maintained mustache that failed to add the years he clearly desired, he eyed two hawks with poorly disguised suspicion. "Everything's arranged, Sheriff. Horses and supplies for 4 days. Make it 6, Clara said. "And add medical supplies. If we find those children, they'll have been exposed to the elements for nearly 2 weeks." The deputy nodded stiffly. "Mr. Thornton from the railroad wishes to speak with you, Sheriff. Says it's urgent," Holloway sighed. "Tell him I'll see him in an hour." He specifically mentioned hearing rumors about a renewed search effort. A heavy silence settled over the room. "The railroad's been too quick to declare those children lost," Clara said, eyes flashing. "One cursory search, and they consider their obligation fulfilled. Meanwhile, their construction continues uninterrupted." "Miss Bennett," the sheriff cautioned. "Don't Miss Bennett me, Sheriff. We both know the new railway spur to the mines takes precedence over 43 orphans in the company's ledger." Two hawks watched this exchange with interest. Beneath the schoolteacher's proper exterior lay a steel he recognized, the same unrelenting determination that had once driven him to track a mountain lion for 7 days after it killed a tribal elder. "We leave at dawn," Holloway said firmly, "before Thornton can arrange any official interference." "Deputy, not a word about our Apache guide or our destination," Wilson nodded. Though his expression revealed discomfort with the deception, Clara retrieved her father's badge, clutching it briefly before returning it to her pocket. "I'll bring my father's Henry rifle as well," she added, answering the unasked question in Two Hawk's eyes. "I'm quite proficient with it." Two Hawks found himself re-evaluating the school teacher. Perhaps these white settlers would not be the burden he had anticipated on this hunt. Until dawn, he said, moving toward the door. He had preparations of his own to make, rituals. His people performed before entering places where the natural and spiritual worlds grew thin. Dawn broke in ribbons of orange and gold as the small party rode west. From Copper Creek, Two Hawks led, followed by Clara, with Sheriff Holloway and Deputy Wilson bringing up the rear. They rode in silence, each lost in private thoughts about what they might find. By midday, the landscape had transformed from scrubby desert to a vast, empty plain broken only by occasional rock formations that cast long shadows. The sun beat down mercilessly, and Two Hawks noted how Clara adjusted her wide-brimmed hat without complaint, while Deputy Wilson constantly wiped sweat from his brow. "How much farther?" Wilson called out during their brief rest to water the horses. 2 days, Two Hawks replied. If weather holds, Sheriff Holloway studied the horizon with a practiced eye. "Looks clear enough. Desert weather changes quick," Two Hawks cautioned. "Like men's promises." Clara smiled faintly at this, the first real emotion she had displayed since they departed. They rode until dusk, making camp in the shelter of a rock outcropping. After a simple meal of jerky and hardtack, Two Hawks moved away from the fire, settling cross-legged on a flat stone to watch the stars emerge. Clara joined him, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders against the desert night's chill. "The children," she said without preamble. "You believe they're still alive?" It wasn't a question. "Don't know," Two Hawks answered honestly. "But death leaves signs. Saw none." "My sister wouldn't have abandoned them," Clara said. "Whatever happened, Margaret would have tried to protect those children until her last breath." Two Hawks nodded, respecting her certainty. "The Apache have stories," he said after a long pause. "About places where people vanish." Clara turned to study his face in the starlight. "What kind of stories?" "Spirit places, where world is thin, where other beings can reach through." She considered this. "Like the fairy rings in Irish folklore. Places where children are lured away to other realms?" Two Hawks looked at her with new appreciation. Most white settlers dismissed native beliefs as primitive superstition. "Similar, yes. My mother came from Ireland," Clara explained. "She filled my childhood with tales of the Sidi and their tricks." Her voice softened with memory. "I stopped believing such stories when I grew up, of course. Growing up often means forgetting what children know," Two Hawks observed. They fell silent as Sheriff Holloway approached, tobacco pouch in hand as he prepared his evening pipe. "You two solving the mystery already?" he asked, the attempted humor falling flat in the night air. "Comparing legends," Clara replied. "Different peoples, similar fears." The sheriff lit his pipe, the tobacco glowing orange in the darkness. "My grandmother was Choctaw," he said unexpectedly. "She had stories too, about shadow people who stole children." He puffed thoughtfully. "Never put much stock in them, but sometimes out here." He gestured to the vast emptiness surrounding them. Deputy Wilson called from the campfire, his voice slightly higher than usual. "Sheriff, you might want to see this." They returned to find Wilson holding something he'd pulled from his saddlebag, a small carved wooden doll with a painted face, simple dress and yarn hair. The doll's features were crude but expressive, clearly handmade with care. "Found this the day before we rode out," Wilson explained. "Behind the general store. Didn't think much of it until now." He turned it over to reveal initials carved into the bottom. E.L. Clara took the doll, her hands trembling slightly. "Elizabeth Larson," she whispered. "She was 7, one of the quietest children in the group." She looked up, eyes wide. This doll was her most prized possession. She wouldn't have parted with it willingly. "Store's behind our route out of town," Sheriff Holloway said. "How'd it get there?" Two Hawks took the doll, examining it carefully. The wood was smooth from constant handling, but something else caught his attention. A faint smell, barely perceptible. "Not human, not animal, something other. Doesn't make sense," Wilson insisted. "That orphan train disappeared nearly 2 weeks ago, over 100 miles from town." "Makes sense if children were brought back," Two Hawks said quietly. or if something wearing child's form walked through town. A chill settled over the group that had nothing to do with the desert night. Clara reclaimed the doll, clutching it as if it might somehow lead them to its owner. "We should sleep," the sheriff finally said. "Long ride tomorrow," but as they settled into their bedrolls, Two Hawks noticed none of them closed their eyes easily. The little wooden doll sat propped against Clara's saddlebag, its painted eyes reflecting the dying firelight like tiny, watchful stars. The second day of riding brought them deeper into the empty wilderness. The terrain grew rougher, dotted with gnarled juniper trees and rocky outcroppings that cast strange shadows. Two Hawks maintained a steady pace, occasionally dismounting to examine the ground with a focus that bordered on reverence. By mid-afternoon, Clara noticed a change in his demeanor, a heightened alertness, his eyes constantly scanning the horizon. "We're getting close," she said, not a question. Two Hawks nodded. "We'll reach Wagon by sundown." Deputy Wilson, sunburned despite his hat, looked relieved. "Good. Sooner we find whatever there is to find, sooner we can head back." Sheriff Holloway shot him a reproving glance. "We'll stay as long as necessary." As the sun began its descent, casting long shadows across the landscape, Two Hawks led them into a shallow canyon. The temperature dropped noticeably as they entered the shadow of the high walls, bringing welcome relief from the day's heat but also an unsettling sense of isolation. "There," Two Hawks pointed to a bend ahead. They rounded the curve and fell silent. The wagon sat as Two Hawks had described, half buried in sand, its wooden frame bleached nearly white. One wheel was shattered, another missing entirely. The canvas cover hung in tatters, fluttering occasionally in the faint breeze like a tattered ghost. Clara dismounted first, approaching slowly. The others followed, leading their horses. No one spoke as they surveyed the scene. "Where are the draft horses?" Sheriff Holloway finally asked. "No sign," Two Hawks replied. "No bones? No tracks leading away." Deputy Wilson circled the wagon, hand resting on his holster as if expecting danger. "This doesn't make sense. Even if they were attacked, there'd be something. Blood, bullet holes, signs of struggle." Clara had reached the wagon now. She touched the wood tentatively, then climbed onto the driver's bench. "The personal trunks are still here," she called, peering inside. "Provisions, too, barely touched." She disappeared into the wagon's interior. Moments later, they heard a sharp intake of breath. "Clara!" Sheriff Holloway moved toward the wagon. She emerged holding a leather satchel, her face pale. "It's Margaret's." She opened it with trembling fingers, removing a folded piece of parchment. Her map. She was so proud to be entrusted with navigating. Two Hawks approached as Clara unfolded the map. It was detailed, clearly drawn by someone with cartographic training. The route was marked in red ink, showing the path from Chicago to Los Angeles, with notations for water sources, settlements, and potential danger areas. But what caught Two Hawks' attention were the additions, symbols drawn in a different ink along the margins and over certain areas. Symbols that made his blood run cold. "What are these markings?" Clara asked, pointing to a cluster of strange glyphs near their current location. Two Hawks didn't answer immediately, studying the symbols with growing unease. Some he recognized from forbidden teachings, warnings about thin places, spirit crossings. Others were unfamiliar, but their intent seemed clear. "Danger, avoid, death. Your sister make these marks?" he finally asked. "I don't think so." Clara examined the map more closely. "This isn't her handwriting. And look, these symbols overlay the original route. They were added later." Sheriff Holloway joined them, pipe clenched between his teeth. "Someone knew," he muttered. "Someone knew and sent them this way anyway." "Or redirected them," Clara suggested, tracing the original route and comparing it to where they now stood. "They should have been 30 miles north of here, following the old Spanish trail." Deputy Wilson, who had been searching inside the wagon, emerged with a child's shoe. "Found dozens of personal items, all neatly packed. Like they just walked away." "Not walked," Two Hawks said, kneeling to study the ground around the wagon. "Look," they gathered around. In the hard-packed earth, partially obscured by drifting sand, were footprints. Small footprints, dozens of them leading away from the wagon in all directions. And just as Two Hawks had described, they simply stopped after about 20 paces, as if each child had vanished mid-stride. "Dear God," Clara whispered. Sheriff Holloway removed his hat, running a hand through thinning hair. "Wilson, start setting up camp. We'll lose daylight soon." Two Hawks moved away from the group, following the faint traces of the largest footprints, adult-sized, until they too disappeared. As the sun touched the canyon rim, casting the site in blood-red light, he felt the weight of watching eyes. Not from the living members of their party, but from something else, something that had waited a long time for their arrival. The map in Clara's hands seemed to whisper secrets as the wind lifted its corners. Secrets written in symbols old as the land itself. Night fell quickly in the canyon, darkness pooling like ink in the shadows. Deputy Wilson built a fire that seemed small against the vast emptiness surrounding them. They ate in silence, the abandoned wagon looming in the firelight like a skeletal sentinel. Sleep came reluctantly. Two Hawks took first watch, positioning himself on a rock outcropping with clear views of both the camp and the approaches. The night was unnaturally quiet, no insects chirping, no nocturnal animals foraging. Just the occasional whisper of wind through the canyon and the soft crackle of dying embers. 3 hours into his watch, Two Hawks noticed Clara stir, then sit upright suddenly. She glanced around, disoriented, before spotting him. Without a word, she wrapped a blanket around her shoulders and joined him. "I can't sleep," she said simply. "Every time I close my eyes, I see those footprints ending in nothing." Two Hawks nodded. "Dreams come strongly here." "Not dreams, nightmares." Her voice was steady, but he could sense her unease. "I heard children laughing, just at the edge of sleep, like they were playing nearby." Two Hawks had heard them too, faint, distant sounds that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. "This place remembers," he said. Clara hugged her knees to her chest, studying the stars. "What does that mean?" "Some places hold memories. Events leave marks." He struggled to translate concepts his people understood intuitively into English words. "Strong emotions, fear, pain, joy, sink into earth, remain. Like ghosts." Two Hawks shook his head. "Not spirits of dead, more like echoes." A soft sound made them both turn. Sheriff Holloway approached, moving quietly for a man his age. "Thought I heard voices," he explained, joining them. He carried something wrapped in a bandana, which he unfolded carefully to reveal a journal bound in cracked leather. "Found this wedged under the driver's seat. Belonged to the wagon master." Clara took it gently, opening to the first page. "Samuel Jeffries," she read. "I remember him. A retired army man, stern but fair." She turned pages slowly, skimming entries that chronicled the journey from its beginning in Chicago. Two Hawks watched her face as she reached the final entries. Her expression changed from concentration to confusion to growing alarm. The last entry was 4 days before they disappeared, she said, reading aloud. "Second time we've spotted riders on the ridge. Too distant to identify. Keeping extra watch tonight." She turned the page. Then this, the next day. Changed route on advice from railroad man. Says there's water trouble on planned trail. New route adds 3 days, but supposedly safer. Children excited about detour to see the painted rocks. Painted rocks. Sheriff Holloway frowned. "Nothing like that around here that I know of." Clara continued reading. Margaret uneasy about new directions. Says map shows different landmarks than we're seeing. Having second thoughts, but we've come too far on new trail to turn back. She turned the page. The final entry is strange. Children restless last 2 nights. Several claim to hear singing after dark. Elizabeth insists she sees other children watching from the rocks. Caught 3 of them trying to wander off before dawn. Margaret says the stars look wrong. Nonsense, of course, but everyone on edge. Even the horses. The journal ended there, the remaining pages blank. "Lured," Two Hawks said softly. "First the wagon, then the children." Sheriff Holloway rubbed his jaw thoughtfully. "Railroad man. Must be talking about Thornton or one of his surveyors. Why would the railroad want to redirect an orphan transport?" Clara asked. "Don't know," Holloway admitted. "But I aim to find out when we get back." Two Hawks was only half listening. His attention had been drawn to the darkness beyond their small circle of firelight. For a moment, just a moment, he thought he'd seen movement. Small shapes, child-sized, flitting between rocks. "Tomorrow we follow tracks," he said, standing. "All tracks, but they just stop," Deputy Wilson called from his bedroll, apparently awake and listening. "Tracks always lead somewhere," Two Hawks replied, "even when eyes can't see path." As if in answer to his words, a soft sound drifted through the canyon, the distant laughter of children playing. It lasted only seconds, but all four of them heard it, their faces illuminated by firelight as they turned toward the sound. The journal in Clara's hands seemed heavier suddenly, its final entry a warning they'd understood too late. They were not alone in this place of vanishing. Dawn revealed what darkness had hidden, a landscape transformed. The canyon walls surrounding them were streaked with ochre and pale yellow mineral deposits that, in the slanting morning light, created patterns reminiscent of childlike figures holding hands. The painted rocks from the Wagon Master's final entry. "Didn't notice those yesterday," Sheriff Holloway remarked, squinting upward. "Weren't visible," Two Hawks replied. "Light changes things." After a quick breakfast, they divided the tasks. Two Hawks and Clara would follow one set of footprints, those leading toward the eastern canyon wall. Sheriff Holloway and Deputy Wilson would investigate tracks heading south, where a narrow passage snaked between towering rock formations. "Meet back here by midday," the sheriff instructed. "No one wanders alone." Two Hawks led Clara along the small footprints, moving slowly, eyes scanning not just the ground but the surrounding terrain. The tracks belonged to several children walking close together. Unlike the others, these didn't simply stop, but grew fainter until they disappeared near a tumble of boulders. Clara knelt to examine the last visible impression, a small boot print half filled with wind-blown sand. "Elizabeth," she said with certainty. She had a slight turn to her right foot from a poorly set break. She looked up at Two Hawks. The doll belonged to her. Two Hawks studied the rock formation ahead. Something about it pulled at his senses, a feeling like the moment before lightning strikes. "There," he said, pointing to a narrow crevice nearly hidden by shadow. The gap was barely wide enough for Clara to squeeze through. Two Hawks, broader in the shoulders, had to turn sideways. The passage continued for 15 feet before opening into a small chamber within the canyon wall, a natural alcove sheltered from the elements. Clara gasped. The walls were covered with paintings. Some were clearly ancient, hunting scenes and spirit symbols made with natural pigments in the style of Two Hawks' ancestors. But interspersed among them were newer markings, childish drawings of stick figures, houses and animals. "They were here," Clara whispered, running her fingers over a drawing of what appeared to be the orphan wagon, complete with horses and tiny figures sitting inside. "The orphans sheltered in this place." Two Hawks moved deeper into the chamber, drawn to something half buried in the sandy floor. He knelt, carefully brushing away sand, to reveal a flat stone tablet about the size of his hand. Its surface was carved with symbols, some Apache, others unknown to him. The stone felt unnaturally cold despite the growing heat of the day. "What is it?" Clara asked, joining him. Two Hawks hesitated before lifting the stone. The markings resembled those on Margaret's map, but were far older. "Warning," he said finally. "Very old warning." Clara took the stone, studying the carvings. "Can you read it?" "Parts." He traced one set of symbols. "This speaks of hungry ones. Shadows that walk, child takers, and these..." She indicated a circular pattern of interconnected spirals, doorways, places where world is thin. He reclaimed the tablet, turning it to reveal additional markings on the back. "These tell how they come, through dreams first, then singing, then..." He stopped, the Apache word having no direct translation. "Then what?" Clara pressed. "Taking," he said inadequately. "But not like death, like changing." Clara looked from the stone to the children's drawings. They were trying to tell us what happened, she realized, through their pictures. Two Hawks nodded, attention caught by one drawing in particular, a circle of stick figures holding hands around a larger central figure with too many limbs. Around this disturbing image were small handprints pressed into the wall with mud or paint. "We need to show the others," Clara said. But Two Hawks placed a restraining hand on her arm. "Listen," he whispered, from deeper within the rock. Barely audible came the sound of children singing, a simple, haunting melody that seemed to vibrate through the stone itself. The sound grew louder, then suddenly stopped, replaced by the patter of running feet and muffled giggling that seemed to move around them like invisible currents. Clara's face paled. "They're still here." "Not them," Two Hawks corrected grimly. "Something wearing their voices, using their memories." The stone tablet in his hand grew colder, as if responding to the unseen presence. A warning indeed, but one that had come far too late for 43 orphaned children, led astray into the painted canyon. Sheriff Holloway and Deputy Wilson returned to the wagon site with grim faces. Their search had yielded nothing but more vanishing footprints and an increasing sense of disquiet. "Something ain't natural about this place," Wilson said, his earlier skepticism replaced by nervous vigilance. "Thought I heard whispering the whole time." "Sheriff heard it too." Holloway nodded, lighting his pipe with hands that betrayed the slightest tremor, like someone walking just behind us. "Turn around. Nothing there." Two Hawks and Clara shared their discovery of the hidden chamber, the children's drawings, and the stone tablet. The sheriff examined the ancient artifact with furrowed brows, while Clara sketched the most significant wall drawings in a small notebook. "We need to leave," Wilson insisted. "Get help from the army, maybe." "And tell them what?" Clara challenged. "That we're chasing ghosts and children's voices. They'd laugh us back to Copper Creek." "Something took those children," Two Hawks said quietly. "Still here, still watching." Sheriff Holloway pocketed his pipe. "Decision made." We split up again. "Cover more ground before sundown. Wilson, you're with me heading north. Two Hawks, take Clara west, toward those tall formations." They separated with the agreement to fire a single shot if anyone found something significant. Two Hawks led Clara along a narrow game trail that wound between massive standing stones. The terrain grew increasingly difficult, the trail eventually disappearing into a field of tumbled boulders. "This feels wrong," Clara said, stopping to catch her breath. "Like we're being led." Two Hawks had felt it too, a subtle pressure guiding their choices, drawing them deeper into the maze of stone. "Yes," he agreed. "But by what?" A flicker of movement caught his eye, a small figure darting between rocks 30 yards ahead. "There," he pointed. Clara squinted. "I don't see." The figure appeared again, clearly a child in a simple dress, beckoning before vanishing behind a boulder. "Elizabeth," Clara whispered, recognizing the distinctive limp. She started forward, but Two Hawks caught her arm. "May not be what it appears." Clara hesitated, torn between caution and the desperate need to find her sister's charges. "We have to follow." Two Hawks nodded reluctantly. Carefully, they picked their way through the boulder field, glimpsing the child figure twice more, always just ahead, always beckoning. The formation opened into a narrow ravine where ancient floods had carved the stone smooth. At its center stood a solitary juniper, gnarled and stunted but stubbornly alive. Hanging from one twisted branch was a tarnished brass bell about the size of Two Hawks' palm. It swung gently in a breeze they couldn't feel, producing no sound despite its movement. "That's from the wagon," Clara said, approaching slowly. "It hung from the driver's seat, for signaling river crossings and stops." Two Hawks circled the tree warily. The ground beneath showed no footprints, not even their own, as if they walked on stone untouched by time or elements. Clara reached for the bell, hesitated, then grasped it firmly. The moment her fingers closed around the metal, it rang, a clear, resonant tone that seemed impossibly loud in the confined space. The sound echoed off the ravine walls, multiplying and distorting until it became almost unbearable. Two Hawks clapped his hands over his ears, watching in horror as Clara stood transfixed, unable or unwilling to release the bell. Her lips moved as if in conversation, though no words emerged. "Clara!" He reached for her, only to be driven back by a concussive wave of sound that knocked him to his knees. The ringing stopped abruptly. Clara turned to him, her eyes unfocused. "I heard them," she whispered. "All of them. Elizabeth, the others, Margaret." Her voice broke on her sister's name. "They're alive, Two Hawks, but they're somewhere else. Somewhere close, but not here. What did they say?" he asked, rising cautiously. "They said—" A gunshot interrupted her, echoing across the canyon. The sheriff's signal. Two Hawks' instincts screamed warning. The shot had come from the direction of the wagon, but much closer than it should have been if the sheriff had returned there as planned. "They found something," Clara said, already moving toward the sound. Two Hawks took one last look at the silent bell, now hanging motionless despite the strengthening afternoon wind. A summons and a warning both. Whatever entity had taken the children was aware of their presence now, and had begun to actively lure them deeper into its domain. Two Hawks and Clara raced toward the gunshot, scrambling over rocky terrain as fast as caution allowed. The canyon played tricks with sound, making it impossible to pinpoint the exact location. Twice they changed direction, following echoes that seemed to come from different places entirely. Finally, they spotted Deputy Wilson standing alone atop a flat rock formation, waving urgently. "Where's Sheriff Holloway?" Clara called as they approached. Wilson's face was ashen beneath his sunburn. "Gone, just gone," he swallowed hard. "We were following tracks when he spotted something shiny in that crevice." He pointed to a narrow split in the canyon wall. "Went to investigate. I heard him call out something about finding a badge, then nothing." Wilson's voice cracked. "Called his name. No answer. When I looked in the crevice, he wasn't there. Just empty space in this." He held out a telegram slip, the yellow paper crumpled and stained. Clara smoothed it carefully, reading aloud. "To Nathaniel Thornton, Western Pacific Railroad, from J. Hargrove. Operations urgent. Surveyors report discovery of significant copper deposits in Devil's Canyon region. Native superstitions, making local labor impossible to secure. Recommend immediate acquisition before competing interests. Learn of find workers. Will require alternate route through canyon, despite previous incidents. Confirm." Clara looked up. "Previous incidents?" "Devil's Canyon," Two Hawks repeated. "This place," Wilson nodded grimly. "Found more telegrams scattered inside the crevice, going back months. They knew this area was dangerous. Sent the orphan wagon through anyway." Two Hawks examined the narrow opening where Holloway had vanished. No tracks led in or out, but the stone floor would show none. A faint, unpleasant odor emanated from the darkness. Not decay, but something else. "Something older. Sheriff carried matches?" he asked Wilson. "Always. And his service revolver." Two Hawks nodded. "Shot wasn't warning then." "Was danger." Clara had continued reading the other telegram slips. "These get worse," she said. "Listen, 3 survey teams lost in North Canyon section. Men refuse to enter area. Native guides claim land belongs to ancient spirits that consume souls. Ridiculous superstition, but problem for recruitment. Suggest offering double wages for new teams and routing all traffic well south of problem area." Then this one, dated just 3 weeks ago. "Orphan transport ideal cover for final survey work. Religious mission volunteers won't ask questions about route changes. If successful, proves passage safe for future operations. If not, minimal financial impact. Proceed as discussed." Wilson's jaw tightened. "They used those children as test subjects? To see if the route was safe?" "Worse," Clara said, her voice hard with anger. "They expected them to disappear. Counted it as acceptable loss." Two Hawks had been studying the crevice, noting how the light bent strangely around its edges, as if the opening wasn't entirely part of the natural world. "Need to go in," he said. Fine, Sheriff. Are you insane?" Wilson backed away. "Something took him. Same thing that took the orphans." "Exactly," Clara said, tucking the telegrams into her pocket. "Which means he might be wherever they are, along with my sister." Two Hawks returned to his horse, retrieving a small bundle wrapped in deerskin from his saddlebag. Inside was a ceremonial knife with a handle carved from elk antler, decorated with intricate symbols. His father's knife used in tribal rituals to open the way between worlds. Not all go, he said, unwrapping the blade. Too dangerous. I go alone. No. Clara's voice was firm. Margaret is my sister. Those children were my responsibility. I'm coming with you. Two hawks studied her, seeing the unwavering determination in her eyes. He nodded once, then turned to Wilson. You wait. If not back by sunrise, ride to town. Tell what happened. Wilson looked between them, conflict evident on his young face. Fear warred with duty and shame. Finally, he straightened his shoulders. Sheriff would never abandon his people. I'll come too. Two hawks accepted this with a nod, though privately he thought the deputy's courage might falter when confronted with whatever waited in the darkness. How do we... Wilson gestured to the crevice. I mean, the sheriff went in and just vanished. Two hawks held up the ritual knife, its blade catching the late afternoon sun. Old ways open old doors. He turned to Clara. Doorway will ask for blood. Small price for passage. Clara didn't flinch. Whatever it takes. As two hawks began preparing the ritual his father had taught him long ago, a ritual meant to part the veil between worlds, the wind picked up suddenly, carrying with it the distant sound of children's voices. Not laughter this time, but something more urgent. A warning, perhaps, or an invitation. Two hawks worked methodically, his movements precise and reverent as he prepared the ritual. He arranged small stones in a pattern before the crevice, then burned herbs that filled the air with sweet, sharp smoke. Throughout his preparations, he spoke softly in Apache, ancient words taught by his father, who had learned them from his father before him. Clara and Deputy Wilson watched in silence, the latter's expression shifting between skepticism and growing unease. Is this witchcraft? Wilson finally asked, voice barely above a whisper. No, Clara answered before two hawks could. It's far older than that. Every culture has doorways to the other world. My mother's people called them fairy rings or stone circles. She watched two hawks trace symbols in the dirt. The Apache just remember how to open them. Two hawks completed the pattern, then stood before them, ritual knife in hand. Need blood. Freely given. Payment for crossing. How much blood? Wilson asked nervously. Small cut. Palm of hand. 3 drops only. Two hawks held out the knife, handle first. Must choose. Stay or go. Wilson hesitated, then straightened his shoulders. Sheriff would do the same for me. He took the knife, made a small cut across his palm, and let 3 drops fall onto the central stone in the pattern. The blood seemed to sink into the rock, disappearing completely. Clara went next, unflinching as she drew the blade across her skin. Her blood, too, vanished into the stone. Two hawks made his cut last, deeper than the others. 7 drops fell. Payment not just for passage, but for guidance. The air around the crevice shimmered like heat waves rising from sun-baked stone. The narrow opening widened, darkness deepening until it seemed to absorb the very light around it. From within came a sound, not voices now, but a low, rhythmic pulsing, like the heartbeat of something vast and ancient. What now? Clara asked, binding her cut with a handkerchief. We enter, two hawks said simply. Stay close. Touch only each other. Nothing else. What about our horses? Wilson looked back at the animals tethered nearby. Leave them. Where we go, they cannot follow. Two hawks led the way, stepping into the darkness. Clara followed close behind, with Wilson bringing up the rear. The deputy had drawn his revolver. Though what good bullets might do against spirits, none of them knew. The passage was narrow at first, forcing them to walk single file. The walls felt strange against Two Hawks' fingertips, not quite solid, more like dense fog given form. The darkness was absolute, swallowing the light from the entrance within 3 steps. I can't see, Wilson whispered, his voice tight with controlled panic. Don't need eyes here, Two Hawks replied. Follow my voice. They walked for what seemed both minutes and hours, time stretching strangely in the lightless passage. The air grew colder, damper, filled with unfamiliar scents, metal and earth and something else, something alive. Gradually, Two Hawks became aware of a faint glow ahead. Not daylight, but a pale, bluish luminescence that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. As the passage widened, the source became clear, symbols etched into the stone. similar to those on the ancient tablet, but vastly more numerous, covering every surface in intricate patterns that shifted subtly when viewed from different angles. The passage opened into a circular chamber, perhaps 30 feet across. The glowing symbols provided just enough light to reveal a stone pedestal in the center, upon which rested a tribal mask, unlike any Two Hawks had seen before. It was carved from dark wood, inlaid with shell and bone, depicting a face both human and not. Elongated features, two large eyes with abalone shell insets that caught the ghostly light. "What is this place?" Clara whispered, her breath visible in the cold air. "Old place. Sacred." Two Hawks approached the pedestal cautiously. "Forbidden." Wilson remained near the entrance, gun still drawn. "Forbidden to who?" "Everyone." Two Hawks circled the mask, careful not to touch it. "This is Guardian, Watcher between worlds." He indicated symbols carved into the pedestal. "My people's oldest stories tell of it. Placed here when world was young to keep something out, or keep something in," Clara said quietly, studying the carvings. Two Hawks nodded. "Both, perhaps." A sound echoed through the chamber, footsteps too heavy to be a child's. All three turned as Sheriff Holloway emerged from a passage on the far side of the chamber. His clothes were torn, hat missing, and a deep cut marked his forehead. But his eyes were alert, focused. "Took you long enough," he said gruffly. Relief swept through the group at the sheriff's appearance. Deputy Wilson holstered his gun with shaking hands. "Sheriff, what happened to you? How did you—" "No time," Holloway cut him off. "They know we're here now." He gestured to the passage he'd emerged from. "Found something you need to see. All of you." Two Hawks studied the sheriff carefully. The man's movements were stiff, his speech clipped, different from his usual measured manner. But his eyes were clear, focused. "What did you find?" Clara asked. "Easier to show you." Holloway turned without waiting for agreement. Two Hawks caught Clara's arm as she moved to follow. "Wait," he lowered his voice. "Something not right." "What do you mean?" she whispered back. "It's Sheriff Holloway." "Maybe." Two Hawks glanced at the Guardian mask, noting how its shell eyes seemed to track the sheriff's movements. "Maybe not entirely." Wilson had already followed Holloway several steps into the passage. "You coming?" He called back impatiently. Two Hawks released Clara's arm reluctantly. "Stay close," he murmured. "Touch nothing." They followed the sheriff through a winding tunnel that sloped gradually downward. Unlike the entrance passage, this one was illuminated by the same blue-white symbols, revealing smooth walls that appeared almost polished, as if worn by the passage of countless bodies over centuries. The tunnel eventually opened into a much larger cavern, its ceiling lost in darkness above. Natural stone columns rose from floor to unseen heights, and the air felt warmer, disturbed by currents that carried unfamiliar scents. There, Sheriff Holloway pointed to an alcove, where an ornate wooden desk sat incongruously among the ancient stone. Behind it hung a large wall map covered in markings. Clara approached cautiously. "This is railroad company property," Holloway confirmed. "Station master's office from Copper Creek, or a perfect copy of it. Right down to this." He opened a drawer and removed a heavy ledger bound in black leather. The words, "Western Pacific Railroad, Special Projects," embossed in gold on the cover. Two Hawks remained several paces back, watching both the sheriff and their surroundings with heightened vigilance. Something about this place felt wrong, like a predator's carefully constructed trap. Clara opened the ledger, Wilson reading over her shoulder. The pages contained detailed maps of Devil's Canyon and surrounding territories, alongside columns of figures and cryptic notations. "My God," Clara breathed. "Look at these dates. They've been experimenting with this canyon for years." She turned pages rapidly. 868, 1876, 1882, all noting unexplained disappearances and acceptable losses. "They knew," Wilson said, voice tight with anger. "They've always known about this place." "Not just known," Sheriff Holloway said. "Used it. Deliberately." Clara found a section marked Temporal, Anomalies and Practical Applications, detailed. Notes described how objects, and people who disappeared in certain canyon. Locations sometimes reappeared elsewhere, days, weeks, or years later. They were studying it, she realized, treating people like test subjects. But why? Wilson asked. What could they possibly gain? Sheriff Holloway smiled thinly. Imagine controlling doorways that let you move goods or people instantly across vast distances. No need for thousands of miles of expensive track, just doorways. The implications hung in the air. A railroad company that didn't need rails. And the Orphans? Clara's voice had turned hard. Expendable test subjects, the sheriff said flatly. No one to miss them. Perfect for experimentation. Two hawks had been examining the map on the wall, noting how it differed from natural geography. Lines connected distant points, forming a web centered on Devil's Canyon. Where are the children now? He asked, turning back to Holloway. Something flickered in the sheriff's eyes, a momentary darkness quickly suppressed. Close, I've seen them. They're being kept somewhere deeper. And Margaret? My sister? Clara pressed. She's with them, protecting them. Holloway's expression softened with what appeared to be genuine emotion. She's a brave woman, your sister. Two hawks' unease grew. The sheriff's words rang true, yet something felt increasingly wrong. He glanced back at the tunnel they'd entered through, half expecting to see it closed, trapping them in this unnatural place. The ledger in Clara's hands suddenly felt heavier, pages turning by themselves until they stopped on a detailed drawing of the guardian mask they'd seen earlier. Surrounded by notes in a spidery hand, entity responds to blood offerings. Partial manifestation achieved. Subject Holloway promising vessel for further communication. Proceed with integration protocol. Clara looked up sharply, meeting Two Hawks' eyes in silent warning. The sheriff, or whatever wore his form, smiled, his features subtly shifting as he stepped toward them. The transformation happened swiftly. Sheriff Holloway's face seemed to ripple, features becoming fluid before settling into a familiar arrangement that was nevertheless wrong, like an artist's imperfect copy of a known subject. His eyes darkened to solid black, reflecting the blue glow of the symbols around them. "You've come far," said the thing wearing Holloway's form. The voice remained the sheriff's, but layered beneath it was something older, resonant with multiple tones. "Farther than most," Deputy Wilson stumbled backward, fumbling for his revolver. "Sheriff? What's happening to you?" "The sheriff is here," the entity replied, tapping Holloway's temple. "Watching, learning, as I learn through him." It turned to Two Hawks. "You know what I am, Apache. Your ancestors and I have history." Two Hawks positioned himself between the entity and the others. "Skinwalker," he said, using the closest English term. "Body thief." Such limited words for what I am. The entity smiled with Holloway's mouth. "I am the hunger in the stones, the waiting one. I have worn many skins through many turnings of the stars." Clara slowly closed the ledger, sliding it behind her on the desk. Her other hand moved to her pocket, where Two Hawks knew she carried the small wooden doll. "Where are the children?" she demanded, voice remarkably steady. The entity tilted its head, an unnaturally fluid movement. "Safe, changing, becoming like me." It gestured to the cavern around them. "This place is old, older than your kind's memory. A thin place between worlds where transformation is possible." "Let them go," Clara said. "They're innocent. Innocence makes the vessel pure," the entity replied. "Children adapt, accept, adults resist, break." It gestured to Holloway's form. "This one fights me even now, though he cannot win." Two Hawks had been scanning the cavern, looking for exits, weapons, anything to use against this ancient threat. His eyes fell on a small object near one of the stone columns. A handbell made of silver, its surface etched with symbols similar to those glowing on the walls. The same bell Clara had described from the wagon. Though changed somehow by this place, the entity followed his gaze. "Ah, you found my summoning bell. Clever Apache." It made no move to stop him as Two Hawks carefully retrieved the bell. "It calls to those who hear with more than ears." The children heard. The woman guard heard. This lawman heard. "And what happens to those who answer?" Clara asked, clearly stalling for time as Wilson circled behind the entity. "They join me, become me." Feed me with their memories, their essence. The entity's expression shifted to something almost wistful. I was alone so long, trapped when the stars were in different skies. Now I grow. Soon I will be strong enough to leave this thin place. Wilson lunged suddenly, attempting to restrain the sheriff's body from behind. The entity moved with inhuman speed, twisting free and sending the deputy crashing into the stone desk. Foolish, it hissed, features momentarily losing their human aspect entirely. I have worn the skins of warriors when your kind still huddled in caves. Two hawks held up the silver bell, stopping the entity's advance. This calls you, controls you, the entity hesitated. It is a tether, a focus, but you do not know how to use it, Apache. Two hawks met Clara's eyes briefly, then Wilson's. A silent understanding passed between them. I know the old ways, Two hawks said, raising the bell. My father taught me the songs that bind spirits to their places. Your father, the entity smiled coldly. I remember him. And his father, and the one who came before. Apache trackers, all seeking lost ones I had taken. Its smile widened unnaturally. They never returned to tell what they found. Two hawks felt a chill at the entity's words, but kept his expression impassive. Yet I am here. Yes, the entity's voice dropped to a whisper. You are... The blood remembers, doesn't it? Calls to its own. It took a step closer. Your child is here, Apache. The daughter you failed to protect. I've kept her safe all these years. The bell nearly slipped from Two Hawks' suddenly numb fingers. You lie. I hunger. I take. But I preserve what I take. The entity gestured to a dark passage behind it. She waits with the others. Still a child, as she was when my shadows found her. Would you like to see? Clara had moved to Two Hawks' side, her hand closing over his on the bell. It's trying to manipulate you, she whispered. Yes, he agreed softly. But it may not be lying. The entity wearing Sheriff Holloway's skin watched them with ancient eyes, patient as the stones themselves. It had waited centuries in this place, where time flowed differently. It could wait a moment more for these humans to make their choice. The entity's offer hung in the air like a physical thing. Two Hawks felt Clara's hand tighten over his own, anchoring him to the present when memory threatened to pull him under. Memories of a small face, laughing eyes, tiny hands reaching for his. My daughter died, he said finally, voice steady despite the pain lancing through him. Her spirit walks the ancestor path. Is that what you tell yourself? The entity asked, its borrowed face twisting into an expression of mock sympathy. Easier than admitting you never found her body? Never knew her fate? Deputy Wilson had regained his feet, blood trickling from a cut on his forehead. Don't listen to it, Two Hawks. It's trying to divide us. The entity's attention snapped to Wilson. The young lawman speaks truth. Surprising. Its black eyes narrowed. But you are divided already. The deputy dreams of returning a hero and telling tales of Apache witchcraft to admiring crowds. It turned to Clara. The teacher seeks absolution for sending her sister on a journey she knew was dangerous. Finally, to Two Hawks, and the tracker seeks what he has always sought, a way to undo his greatest failure. Two Hawks met its gaze steadily. What do you want? Want? The entity seemed genuinely surprised by the question. I want what all beings want. To grow, to expand. To not be alone. It gestured around the cavern. I've been prisoner in this thin place for millennia, taking only what strays near when the stars align properly. The railroad, Clara said suddenly. They found you. Made some kind of deal. Yes, clever humans with their machines for moving earth and metal. The entity's smile was terrible in its almost humanity. They feed me orphans, vagrants, workers who ask too many questions. I feed them secrets of pathways between distant places. A mutually beneficial arrangement. Wilson spat on the stone floor. That's monstrous. That is survival, the entity corrected. As is my offer to you now. It extended Holloway's hand toward the silver bell. Give me the bell willingly. Join me of your own choice, not taken but given. In exchange, see those you seek. Speak with them once more. Clara's breath caught. Margaret, You'd let me see my sister? See her. Speak with her. Perhaps even... The entity's voice dropped to a seductive whisper. Save her. Two Hawks felt the pull of the offer, not just to see his daughter, but to undo his failure, to bring her home. The silver bell seemed heavier in his hand, its engravings pulsing with the same blue light as the wall symbols. And if we refuse, he asked, then we continue as before. The entity shrugged Holloway's shoulders. I take, you fight. You fail, it gestured to the tunnel behind them. You may even escape this time. Return to your world with your partial truths and broken understanding. While I keep those you love. Wilson had moved to a position behind Clara, his hand on his holstered gun. Two Hawks caught his eye, gave an imperceptible nod. I need to think, Two Hawks said, lowering the bell slightly. Of course. The entity stepped back, supremely confident. Consider carefully. I offer reunion, redemption. Two Hawks turned as if to confer with Clara and Wilson. As he did, he noticed something half hidden behind the desk. A pair of handcuffs, broken and twisted, one cuff still closed around an invisible wrist. Sheriff Holloway's handcuffs, the metal warped by whatever force had allowed the entity to claim him. In that moment, Two Hawks understood. The sheriff wasn't just possessed, he was fighting back, leaving them clues. The real Holloway was still present, still struggling against the ancient force, wearing his body. The bell, Clara whispered urgently. Two Hawks, I think it's not just for summoning. Look at how the entity watches it. She was right. Despite its casual posture, the entity never took its black eyes off the silver bell. A tether, Two Hawks repeated the entity's own words. A focus. Wilson leaned in closer. What's the plan? Before Two Hawks could answer, a sound drifted through the cavern. Children's voices singing a simple melody, the same one they'd heard near the wagon. The entity's head snapped up, listening, a flash of what looked like alarm crossing its features. They grow restless, it muttered. The joining is incomplete. Two Hawks recognized opportunity in the entity's momentary distraction. He raised the bell, meeting Clara's eyes with silent communication. She nodded almost imperceptibly, slowly reaching for something in her pocket, Elizabeth's wooden doll, the connection to the children they sought. The time for choices had passed. Now was the time for action. Two Hawks raised the silver bell and rang it once, the clear tone reverberating through the cavern with unexpected power. The sound seemed to hang in the air, multiplying and changing, becoming something more than mere vibration. The entity wearing Sheriff Holloway's skin flinched, its black eyes widening. What are you? Two Hawks rang the bell again, cutting off its words. This time, he sang with the tone, an Apache melody ancient as the stones themselves, words his father had made him memorize, even after the tribe had cast him out. Words of binding, he explained between notes. Older than your presence here. The entity snarled, lunging forward only to stop abruptly as Clara withdrew Elizabeth's wooden doll from her pocket. The simple toy glowed with faint blue light, responding to the bell's resonance. The children, Clara said, understanding dawning. They're connected to their possessions, to their memories. Two Hawks nodded, continuing the song while motioning for Wilson to move. The deputy circled cautiously behind the entity, which now stood frozen, its attention torn between the ringing bell and the glowing doll. Stop! It commanded, Holloway's voice breaking through momentarily before sliding back into the multi-layered tone. You don't understand what you're doing. I think we do, Clara replied, stepping forward with the doll held high. You feed on connections, memories, emotions, attachments. That's how you take them, isn't it? But connections work both ways. The entity hissed, Holloway's features distorting. Give me the bell. Now. No, Two Hawks said simply, ringing it a third time. The cavern shuddered. Dust and small stones rained from the unseen ceiling. The glowing symbols on the walls pulsed brighter, their light almost painfully intense. You'll collapse the pathway, the entity warned. Trap us all between worlds. Wilson had reached the desk. He fumbled beneath it, retrieving what Two Hawks had glimpsed earlier, an old brass lantern with a cracked glass chimney. Unlike ordinary lanterns, Its interior glowed with the same ethereal blue light as the symbols. Undiminished despite the damaged glass, found something, Wilson called. Holding the lantern aloft, the entity spun toward him with inhuman speed. "Put that down!" The voice was no longer remotely human, a thunderous roar that shook more dust from above. Two hawks recognized the lantern from ancient stories, a spirit light used by medicine men to navigate the spaces between worlds. How it had come to be here, hidden in this cave of horrors, he could not guess. But its presence was a gift from ancestors long past. "Wilson," he called, "bring it here." The deputy dodged as the entity lunged for him, the movement more fluid than any human body should allow. Sheriff Holloway's form seemed to stretch, limbs elongating unnaturally as it pursued Wilson around the stone desk. Clara stepped into its path, the wooden doll thrust forward. "Elizabeth," she called out loudly. "Margaret, if you can hear me, fight back!" The entity faltered, Holloway's body convulsing as if struck. It rounded on Clara with fury, only to freeze as two hawks rang the bell directly behind it. "Now, Wilson!" Two hawks shouted. The deputy slid the lantern across the stone floor. Two hawks caught it one-handed, immediately raising it high. The blue light intensified, casting strange shadows that moved independent of any physical source. "No!" The entity howled, its borrowed form shifting erratically between Holloway's appearance and something else, something with too many angles and not enough substance. Two hawks spoke the final words of the binding song, then struck the bell against the lantern's metal frame. The resulting sound was unlike anything earthly, a tone that seemed to cut through reality itself. A doorway appeared in the air before them, not a physical opening, but a thinning of whatever separated this realm from another. Through it they glimpsed shadowy figures moving about, child-sized and adult alike. "Margaret!" Clara cried out, recognition in her voice as she stared at one of the adult forms. The entity lunged for the doorway, but Wilson tackled Holloway's body with desperate strength. Both men crashing to the stone floor. "Go!" Wilson shouted, struggling to restrain the thrashing form beneath him. "I'll hold it!" Two hawks grabbed Clara's arm as she stepped toward the opening. "Wait," he cautioned, studying the doorway carefully. Not right. He was correct. The opening was unstable, its edges rippling like disturbed water. The bell continued to vibrate in his hand, though he no longer rang it. "What do we do?" Clara asked, clutching the doll tightly. Two hawks raised the lantern higher, illuminating the threshold fully. "Need anchor. Something connected to both sides." The entity renewed its struggles against Wilson, who was clearly losing the fight. Holloway's body moved with impossible strength, fingers lengthening into claw-like appendages. "Hurry!" Wilson gasped as those claws raked his shoulder. Drawing blood, the entity threw Wilson aside with terrifying strength, sending him crashing into one of the stone columns. It rose to its feet, Holloway's form now barely recognizable, the skin stretched taut over elongated limbs, face distorted like melting wax. "Fools!" it snarled through a mouth no longer entirely human. "You cannot open pathways you don't understand." Clara backed away, still clutching Elizabeth's doll. Two hawks positioned himself between her and the entity, the lantern held high in one hand, the bell in the other. "The anchor," Clara whispered urgently. "What connects to both worlds?" Two hawks' mind raced through possibilities as the entity advanced on them. The bell and lantern were tools, not anchors. The doll connected to Elizabeth, but not to this realm. What existed in both places, tied to both realities? The answer came as the entity lunged forward. Two hawks swung the lantern in an arc, creating a barrier of blue light that momentarily halted the creature's advance. "Blood," he said. "Our blood opened the way in. It will anchor the way out." Clara nodded, understanding immediately. She reached into her pocket with her free hand, withdrawing a small silver pocket watch. It had belonged to her father, she'd mentioned once, the same father whose marshal's badge she carried. The watch had stopped years ago, but she kept it as a reminder of time's passage. "Will this work?" she asked, holding it out. Something to hold the blood. Two Hawks nodded, taking the watch. Its silver case was worn smooth from years of handling, the glass face cracked but intact. He opened it, revealing the intricate mechanism inside. Frozen at 3:27, the moment of her father's passing, Clara had once explained. The entity circled them warily, watching for an opening. "The children are mine now," it said, voice shifting between Holloway's familiar tones and something ancient and cold. "They've begun the change. Soon they'll be neither human nor other, like me. Not if we reach them first," Clara replied, her voice steady, despite the fear two Hawks saw in her eyes. Wilson had regained consciousness, struggling to his knees with one arm hanging uselessly at his side. "Behind you!" he shouted suddenly. Two Hawks spun to see shadowy figures emerging from the walls themselves, not physical beings, but projections or extensions of the entity. They moved jerkily like poorly controlled puppets, their forms vaguely child-shaped, but wrong in proportion and movement. The doorway wavered, beginning to close. "Now," Two Hawks said, handing the pocket watch to Clara. "Cut your palm again. Let 3 drops fall inside." Clara didn't hesitate, using her small pocket knife to reopen the healing cut from earlier. 3 drops of blood fell onto the watch's mechanism, seeming to sink into the gears themselves. Two Hawks did the same, his blood mixing with hers on the delicate clockwork. The moment the blood touched metal, the watch hands began to move, not forward but backward, the tiny mechanism ticking in reverse. The entity howled, a sound of fury and recognition. "The timepiece, no!" Two Hawks understood then. Time itself was different here, flowing according to different rules. The pocket watch, moving backward, somehow aligned with this realm's nature. He raised the lantern and bell together, striking them against each other once more. The resulting tone seemed to pierce reality itself. The doorway stabilized, edges growing sharp and defined. Through it, they could now clearly see children moving about in what appeared to be a massive cavern, lit by the same blue symbols they'd encountered throughout this journey, and among them, adult figures, one unmistakably Margaret Bennett, Clara's sister, and another that made Two Hawks' breath catch in his throat. A woman in Apache dress, her back turned to them, but her posture achingly familiar. "Nayenes Gani," he whispered his wife's name. Forgotten sounds strange on his tongue after so many years. The shadow puppets closed in around them. Wilson had managed to retrieve his revolver, firing a shot that passed harmlessly through one of the figures. "Go," he shouted. "I'll hold them back." Clara grabbed Two Hawks' arm. "We have to go now." Two Hawks hesitated, torn between helping Wilson and the promise of what waited beyond the doorway. The deputy fired again, backing toward them. "Both of you go," Wilson insisted. "Find the children. Find the sheriff. I'll follow." The entity lunged forward in a final, desperate attempt to stop them. Two Hawks thrust the lantern forward like a weapon, its blue light forcing the creature back momentarily. "Together," he said to Clara, gripping the reversed pocket watch between them. Its hands continuing to spin backward at impossible speed. They stepped through the doorway, leaving Wilson and the howling entity behind. Crossing the threshold felt like moving through water. Resistance followed by sudden release as they emerged on the other side. Two Hawks stumbled, disoriented by the transition, while Clara fell to her knees beside him. The air here was different, heavier, filled with unfamiliar scents and a constant low hum just at the edge of hearing. They stood on the shore of a vast underground lake, its dark waters perfectly still, reflecting the blue symbols that covered the cavern ceiling like stars. The space was immense, stretching beyond what should have been physically possible beneath the canyon. "Margaret!" Clara called out, her voice echoing strangely, as if traveling through layers of reality before reaching its destination. The figures they'd glimpsed from the other side were gone, the shoreline empty save for small footprints in the fine, pale sand. Two Hawks knelt to examine them, fresh impressions, dozens of different sizes, leading away from the water toward a narrow path that wound between towering crystal formations. "Children passed here," he said. "Recently." Clara helped him to his feet, both still unsteady in this strange place. "And Margaret." Your wife? Two Hawks shook his head. Don't know. But we followed tracks. They moved along the shoreline, following the footprints. Two Hawks kept the lantern raised, its blue flame now burning brighter than before, as if drawing strength from this realm. The pocket watch remained clutched in Clara's hand, its hands continuing to spin backward at unnatural speed. The doorway closed behind us, she observed, glancing back. Wilson, strong fighter, Two Hawks said, though he shared her concern. Sheriff, too, both still fighting. As they rounded a crystal formation taller than 3 men, they encountered their first sign of the children, a small heart-shaped pendant on a broken chain lying in the sand. Clara picked it up gently. This belongs to Mary Sullivan, she said. One of the older girls. She never took it off. It was her mother's. Two Hawks studied the pendant. Unlike objects from their world, which seemed dull and flat in this place, the necklace glowed with a warm inner light. He touched it cautiously, feeling a pulse like a tiny heartbeat within the metal. Still connected to her, he said. Will help us find them. Clara nodded, slipping the chain into her pocket alongside Elizabeth's doll. They continued along the path, which narrowed as it curved between increasingly dense crystal formations. The structures seemed almost organic, growing from floor to ceiling like petrified trees, their surfaces etched with the same symbols they'd seen throughout their journey. The path ended abruptly at the entrance to another cavern. They paused at the threshold, taking in the scene before them. 43 children sat or stood in a vast circular chamber, arranged around a central pool of the same dark, still water they'd seen in the lake. They were unnaturally still, faces blank, eyes reflecting the blue light from above. Among them moved several adults. Margaret Bennett, immediately recognizable despite her pallor. Samuel Jeffries, the wagon master. And Sheriff Holloway, his form now fully human again, though he moved with the same eerie stillness as the children. And standing apart, watching over a small group of the youngest children, was a woman in traditional Apache dress, her long hair flowing down her back. Two Hawks felt his heart stutter in his chest. Nyenes Gani, he whispered. The woman turned at the sound, revealing a face both achingly familiar and disturbingly changed. His wife's features were the same as he remembered, yet her eyes held the same blank emptiness as the others. At her side stood a girl of perhaps 8 years, the age their daughter would have been when she disappeared. The child bore a striking resemblance to both of them, but like the others, seemed disconnected from reality, moving only when directed. Clara gripped Two Hawks' arm. They're all here, all alive, but something's wrong with them. Before Two Hawks could respond, a small object rose from the central pool, a heart-shaped stone that pulsed with crimson light, suspended in the air above the water. As it emerged, the assembled children and adults turned toward it in unison, raising their hands in a gesture of supplication. A voice spoke from the stone, the same multi-layered tones they'd heard from the entity, but stronger here, more defined. I feel you, intruders. You who bring objects of connection, who walk between worlds uninvited. The stone pulsed brighter with each word. You have come for what is mine, but they have already begun the joining. Their hearts are no longer entirely their own. The heartstone rose higher, its crimson glow intensifying. See what you have interrupted, the great work of becoming. As one, the assembled children opened their mouths and sang the same haunting melody they had heard throughout their journey. But here, in this place, the sound carried physical power, waves of force that nearly drove Two Hawks and Clara to their knees. The children's song drove Two Hawks and Clara back against the crystal formations, its power manifesting as visible waves of blue energy that rippled through the cavern. The heartstone pulsed in rhythm with the melody, casting crimson shadows across the assembled faces. What's happening to them? Clara gasped, hands pressed over her ears. The joining, Two Hawks replied, struggling to remain upright. Entity binds them to itself. He fumbled at his chest, withdrawing an object he'd carried since his daughter's disappearance, a small amulet carved from elk antler in the shape of a heart suspended on a leather cord. Within the carving, a small piece of turquoise caught the light. glowing with an inner fire that seemed to resist the oppressive energies around them. The heart amulet had been a gift to his daughter, made by his own hands. When she vanished, he'd found it near their home. The leather cord snapped as if torn away in struggle. He'd worn it ever since, a reminder of his failure and his purpose. Now it responded to the crimson heartstone, vibrating against his palm with increasing intensity. "My daughter's heartstone," he explained, voice tight with emotion. "Made to protect her spirit." Clara's eyes widened with understanding. She reached into her pocket, withdrawing Elizabeth's wooden doll and Mary's heart pendant. Both objects now glowed with the same inner light as Two Hawks' amulet. "Connections," she said. Objects they loved, touched, carried. Parts of themselves they left behind. Two Hawks nodded, plan forming. Items of power, of identity. He gazed at the assembled children, his wife, his daughter. "May break entities hold." The song reached a crescendo, the heartstone pulsing violently above the dark pool. The entity's voice emerged again, layered with the voices of all those under its control. "Too late," it proclaimed. "The final binding begins. Soon they will be neither human nor other, extensions of my consciousness across all worlds." Two Hawks met Clara's eyes. Without words, understanding passed between them. They had only moments to act before the transformation became irreversible. "The lantern," he said, pressing the still burning blue light into her hands. "Keep path home open." Clara nodded, taking the lantern and moving carefully along the periphery of the chamber, avoiding the direct attention of the assembled throng. Two Hawks stepped forward, heart amulet extended before him like a shield. Its turquoise center flared brighter as he approached the edge of the pool, pushing back against the crimson light emanating from the hovering stone. "Daughter," he called out, voice steady despite the maelstrom of emotions within him. "Ayasha, remember your name." The girl standing beside his wife showed no reaction, her small face blank, eyes reflecting only the crimson glow of the entity's heartstone. "Your name is Ayasha," Two Hawks repeated, taking another step forward. "Daughter of Two Hawks and Nyanesgani, born under summer stars." Something flickered in the girl's expression, the faintest hint of recognition, quickly suppressed. The entity sensed the disruption, the hovering heartstone pulsing more rapidly, the song from the assembled children growing more intense. "They are mine," the entity insisted, voice booming throughout the cavern. Their former connections mean nothing now. Two Hawks ignored it, focusing entirely on his daughter. "Ayasha, you danced with butterflies, counted stars, named each horse in our camp." He raised the heart amulet higher. "I made this for your 5th summer, to protect your spirit on dark nights." The turquoise at the center of the amulet flared suddenly, shooting a beam of blue-green light directly at the girl. When it touched her, she gasped, the first independent sound from any of the assembled throng. Her eyes cleared momentarily, confusion and recognition warring across her features. "Father?" The word was barely audible, a whisper almost lost beneath the continuing song. "Yes," Two Hawks confirmed, voice breaking despite himself. "Come back to me, daughter." Clara had reached the far side of the chamber, where she carefully set down the lantern. Its blue flame illuminated Elizabeth's wooden doll, which she held forward toward a small girl near the back of the assembly. Elizabeth Larson, recognizable from Clara's descriptions. "Elizabeth," she called out. "Remember your doll? You named her Hope," the entity roared, a sound of fury and alarm that shook crystal shards from the ceiling. The crimson heartstone descended closer to the pool, its light intensifying. "No!" it thundered. "They are mine!" But it was too late. As Elizabeth's blank expression flickered with recognition, other children began to stir. Clara moved quickly among them, touching Mary's pendant to the older girl's hand, sparking another moment of clarity. Two Hawks waded into the dark pool, heart amulet raised high, its light now forming a protective dome around him as he approached the hovering crimson stone. "You have no power over willing hearts," he declared. Ancient words his grandfather had taught him, rising to his lips. "Only what is freely given can truly be possessed." the entity's furious howl echoed through the cavern as Two Hawks reached for its heart. With his own daughter's amulet clutched tight in his fist, Two Hawks plunged his daughter's heart amulet into the crimson heartstone, turquoise meeting blood-red crystal with a sound like breaking glass. Light erupted from the point of contact, neither blue nor red, but a violet so intense it forced everyone to shield their eyes. "No!" The entity's voice splintered into thousands of separate tones, as if countless voices suddenly cried out in discord. "Centuries of gathering! My collection!" Two Hawks held firm, despite the energy coursing through his body, threatening to tear him apart. The amulet burned in his hand, but he refused to release it, pushing it deeper into the entity's heart. "Father!" Ayasha's voice cut through the chaos. His daughter rushed to the edge of the pool, suddenly fully aware, her eyes clear and focused. "Father, let go! It will destroy you." "Listen to her!" Clara called from where she knelt beside Elizabeth, the wooden doll now clutched in the child's own hands. Around the chamber, more children were awakening, confusion giving way to fear as they realized their surroundings. Two Hawks felt the entity's power surging, trying to force him away. But something else was happening, memories flashing before his eyes, not just his own, but countless others. Lives the entity had consumed over millennia. Fragments of consciousness it had absorbed and never fully digested. Among them, he glimpsed his wife's memories, her desperate fight as shadow figures took their daughter, her pursuit into the canyon, her final moments of independence before the entity claimed her. His heart broke and mended in the same moment, understanding at last what had happened to his family. Two Hawks. His wife's voice, her true voice, called to him. Nayenesgani stood beside Ayasha at the pool's edge, her eyes clear for the first time. Together, she waded into the dark water, moving with purpose despite years of enslavement. When she reached him, her hand closed over his on the amulet, adding her strength to his. "Our daughter's heart," she said, "made with love, stronger than ancient hunger." Clara had begun guiding the awakening children toward the lantern, its blue flame now forming a doorway that hadn't been there moments before, a path back to their world. Margaret Bennett moved among them, helping the smallest ones, her teacher's instincts returning as the entity's hold weakened. "You cannot defeat me," the entity insisted. Though its voice had diminished, uncertainty creeping in where there had been only arrogance before. "I am this place. I have always been. No longer," Two Hawks replied, feeling his wife's strength flowing through him, their daughter's love embodied in the amulet they both held. "You are hunger without purpose, taking without giving." He twisted the amulet, driving it deeper into the heartstone. Cracks spread across its crimson surface, light spilling from within. "What you take unwillingly," Two Hawks continued, ancient wisdom flowing through him, "you cannot truly possess. And what is given freely," Nayenesgani added, "cannot be stolen." With a final surge of effort, they drove the amulet completely into the heartstone. The entity's scream transcended sound, becoming a psychic wave that rippled through the cavern. The heartstone shattered, fragments falling into the dark pool and disappearing beneath its surface. The chamber began to shake violently, crystal formations crashing down around them. The boundary between worlds was collapsing. "Run!" Two Hawks shouted, lifting Ayasha into his arms as he and his wife waded out of the pool. "To the light!" Clara and Margaret had already guided most of the children through the doorway formed by the lantern's flame. Sheriff Holloway, fully himself again, helped the stragglers along. "Wilson," Clara called back as Two Hawks approached with his family. "No sign," the sheriff answered grimly. "We can't wait." The cavern was disintegrating now, great chunks of ceiling plunging into the pool, which had begun to boil and steam. The entity's realm was dying with its master. Two Hawks paused at the threshold, looking back one last time at the place that had held his daughter and wife prisoner for so long. Then, with Ayasha clutched tight against his chest and Nayenesgani's hand firmly in his, he stepped through the doorway. They emerged into chaos. The cave in their world was collapsing too, the boundaries between realities failing completely. Sheriff Holloway and Margaret were hurrying the children toward the exit tunnel, which still appeared stable. "The way out is clear," Clara confirmed, counting heads frantically. 41, 42, 43. All the children are accounted for. Two Hawks guided his family after them, heart full in a way he had not experienced in years. Whatever happened now, they would face it together. As the last of them reached the tunnel entrance, a figure stumbled from the shadows. Deputy Wilson, bloodied but alive, Sheriff Holloway's handcuffs dangling from one wrist. "Thought you'd leave without me," he managed, collapsing into Clara's supporting arms. "Never," she assured him as two Hawks helped steady the young deputy. They escaped the cave system just as it collapsed entirely, sealing whatever remained of the entity and its realm beneath tons of rock. Daylight greeted them, real sunlight, warm and golden, not the ethereal blue glow they had lived with for what felt like eternities. The orphan children blinked in the brightness, many crying, some laughing, with the simple joy of being alive and free. Margaret moved among them with Clara, offering comfort and reassurance. Two Hawks stood with his wife and daughter on a rock overlooking the canyon, watching as the last echoes of the collapse faded into silence. Iyasha's small hand gripped his tightly. "Will it come back?" she asked, wisdom beyond her years in her eyes. Two Hawks considered, feeling the weight of ancient knowledge gained from his confrontation with the entity. "Not in our lifetime," he answered honestly, "or our children's children. But someday, perhaps, then we will remember," Nayanesgani said, "and teach others to remember, so they will be prepared." From a pouch at his waist, Two Hawks withdrew a small seed, one he had carried for many seasons, waiting for the right soil, the right time. He knelt, carefully digging a small hole in the desert soil with his fingers. "What are you planting, Father?" Iyasha asked, kneeling beside him. "New beginning," he replied, placing the seed and covering it gently. "Life, where there was only taking." As they watched, a tiny green shoot emerged impossibly fast from the desert sand, reaching for the sun. In that moment, Two Hawks knew with certainty that whatever darkness had been sealed beneath the stones, something stronger had survived in all of them, the capacity to grow, to heal, to begin again. The lost children had been found. The lonely Apache would sleep soundly once more.